Cardinal Müller has broken the silence with a forceful intervention. He maintains that bishops are not obligated to blindly follow papal directives, especially when these impose unjust orders. They should not give in to those who intend to eliminate tradition. His words represent a clear sign of resistance. But he hasn't limited himself to a mere theoretical defense. He has also outlined a concrete escape route. What does all this mean for the future of the Church? Who will have the courage to pay attention? Stay with us until the end. While the world's attention is on Rome and the power dynamics forming for the next conclave, the Synodical Church continues its reformist path without hesitation, fighting with an almost blind determination against established tradition. Nothing seems to be able to stop the demolition of the customary Mass, not the pleas of the faithful, nor the pleas of the priests, not even common sense, which would suggest a pause for reflection. Each step of the synodal path, every document and official statement seems to follow a predefined plan. There's talk of listening, inclusion, and respect for diversity, and yet, the one area that seems to be deprived of both attention and respect is tradition. Uniformity, criticized in other areas, becomes an absolute dogma when it comes to imposing a single liturgy, a single way of living the faith, and a monolithic vision of the Church. The traditional Mass is considered outdated because it represents what some want to erase completely. And it's not just about numbers. If it were, it would be enough to let tradition die out on its own. However, contrary to what was expected, despite the prohibitions, restrictions and closures, the faith rooted in tradition continues to grow stronger. The churches that still celebrate the old rite are overflowing, the communities are thriving, young people are flocking to them, and this is unacceptable to those who have decided to erase the past. Under the weight of unfair decisions, many bishops have closed the doors to this ancient liturgy, often giving in to direct pressure from Rome. But now, a well-known cardinal is breaking the silence and making an open call for resistance. Let's be honest, this isn't just a simple debate about liturgy, but a clash between two visions of the Church. On one hand, there's a church rooted in the continuity of faith, and that sees tradition as the driving force of its identity. On the other, an institution that, in the name of the new, seems determined to disconnect from its past, imposing an artificial uniformity that erases its history. The message is clear. You can't build a Catholic future by getting rid of its own legacy. Cardinal Müller, the former head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, has spoken out strongly in defense of the traditional Latin Mass, saying that bishops don't have to follow orders from Rome if those orders hurt the people they serve. This isn't just any statement. This is a direct challenge to those who, in recent years, have treated traditional Catholics like a problem that needs to be eradicated. The Church isn't an army barracks where orders are followed mechanically, the Cardinal repeated, emphasizing that true obedience is to Christ and not to bureaucratic decrees that stifle faith. His words come at a particularly critical time. Many of the faithful have suffered the deprivation of the liturgy that for centuries has sanctified entire generations. If, until now, the resistance has been whispered and hidden, Müller brings it to light, offering the bishops a theological justification to oppose the impositions of Rome. According to him, the sacraments should not be eliminated, but should be accessible to all. A principle that should be obvious in a church that proclaims inclusion and welcome, but instead reserves the harshest treatment for the children most faithful to tradition. And this statement is not an isolated case. Other prelates, more or less explicitly, are beginning to argue that an unjust decree does not morally oblige its application. The key question is this: can the Mass, which has formed saints, enlightened the doctors of the Church, and nourished generations of faithful, be suppressed in the name of a supposed liturgical unity that isn't actually required in any other Catholic rite? Why can the Eastern Catholic Churches preserve their traditions without any problems, while those attached to the Latin Mass are treated like rebels? Cardinal Müller hasn't limited himself to a theoretical defense, but has laid out a concrete path. Bishops have a duty to protect the right of the faithful to the sacraments. There is no divine law that mandates the disappearance of the traditional liturgy. If the principle of synodality, so praised by Pope Francis, has any real meaning, then it should also apply to those who wish to keep the traditional Mass. The reality, however, is that synodality is only applied when it serves to dismantle tradition, never to preserve it. Cardinal Müller's words represent a strong signal. The resistance is growing, and not all pastors are willing to submit to an ideological line that nullifies centuries of faith. If a cardinal today has the courage to express this thought publicly, how many others share it in silence? How many faithful, deprived of guidance, are just waiting for a sign to rise up? The battle for the traditional Latin Mass is far from over. Maybe it's just beginning. But why this stubborn persecution of the traditional Latin Mass? The question is unavoidable, and the answer, though disconcerting, is easy to guess. This isn't just about liturgy. It's about a very clear theological and ideological project. Getting rid of the traditional Latin Mass isn't random or just some neutral administrative decision. It's part of a bigger plan to redefine Catholicism, changing it into something totally different from its 2,000-year-old tradition. The idea that the Pope can, with a simple stroke of a pen, declare unacceptable what for centuries has been the center of the Church's life, represents a complete novelty in Catholic history. Never before has such a venerable rite, a source of holiness and grace for countless faithful, been treated as a problem to be eliminated. Never before has a pope been seen actively trying to destroy what his predecessors had guarded and passed on with such effort. True, throughout the centuries there have been liturgical developments and reforms, but always under the sign of continuity. Today, however, they are trying to impose a clean break, a new beginning that seems to want to erase the past. And this is where the central question lies. This liturgical revolution isn't just a change in form, but a substantial transformation. It's not just about changing how the Mass is celebrated, but redefining the very essence of the faith. Isn't it clear that the suppression of the traditional Latin Mass is just one step in a much larger process? It's no coincidence that those who oppose the old liturgy today are often the same ones promoting a vision of a church open to compromises with the world, willing to water down doctrine to appear more acceptable in the eyes of modern society. The problem, however, goes way beyond a simple internal struggle within the church hierarchy. The real drama is that the elimination of tradition leaves the faithful without points of reference, disoriented and deprived of their fundamental right to receive the sacraments in the form that has nourished the faith of their ancestors. So the real question isn't if the traditional Mass will survive, because it definitely will, but how far those who govern the Church will be willing to go to get rid of it. How many of the faithful will have to suffer before this senseless war comes to an end? How many priests will be persecuted? How many communities destroyed? How many churches forced to close their doors? Time will tell, but one thing is for sure: tradition will not surrender. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Comment Amen if you liked the video. God bless you.